Okay, welcome to chapter 1, in which we are talking about the social work profession. So, we are considered a helping profession, and we focus on economic and social justice advocacy, and we work with individuals, groups, families, and communities. We call the individuals, groups, families, and communities because we're a little lazy. We like to say IFGOC in this program. So if you hear, and you'll learn this really quickly, IFGOC, it stands for individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. We need to understand politics, assess needs, and be aware of our client environment. Now, when we say client environment, we're meaning a couple of different things here, which we will become more clear as we go through the semester. But environments can be a couple of different things. We have our physical environment, okay, so the things that are physically around us. Our natural environment, so our natural resources, where we live. Do we live in wooded areas? Here in Rio, a lot of us live or are from Appalachia. And so that has different resources and things and is a completely different environment than someone who lives in California. We also have our social environment. And we talk about who is in our network, who are our friends, our families, what kind of supports and resources do we have within those social networks. And so that's our social environment. So our environments include a lot of different things. We have our political environment. We have, our needs environments and things like that. And so there's a lot. And so we social workers, what makes us different from other helping professions is that we look at the person in environment. It's one of our foundations, and it's one of our biggest foundations. Person environment, what the heck does that mean? Well, we call it PIE, and that's something I want you to remember. Person in environment, PIE, PIE, makes us the sweetest. I got lost in my cheesy joke. I'm sorry. It makes us the sweetest profession out there because we work with PIE, meaning that we take into account the entire environment when we are intervening with an individual. Psychology, they focus on the individual and they don't really look at the outside environment when they're intervening with their counseling strategies. But yet we social workers, we definitely do. Because if something is going on in someone's environment that is causing chaos, then we kind of need to intervene with that environment. Otherwise, that person isn't going to get better per se, more than likely. And so in order to be successful in treatment, we have to look at the entire picture, not just the person. And so, yes, that's what we mean there. Okay. So our core values and competencies and responsibilities. We have 6 core values in social work, and then we have competencies. There are 9 different competencies, and then of course our responsibilities. We have our national leading organization, which is the National Association of Social Work, it's the NASW. The NASW is like yes, we like the NASW. You can become a member of the NASW as a student for pretty cheap, but they are a great organization and provide a lot of resources and help for social workers. We also have the Council on Social Work Education, the CSWE. This accreditates our social work programs. For example, here at Rio, we have an accredited program. In fact, right now we're going through that process, so it's been a lot of fun. But this organization gives programs the ability to teach social work and gives them basically almost like certifies them to do so. And if you do not get a degree from an accredited program from the CSWE, you cannot sit for your licensure. So this is big. They pretty much handle how and what we teach our social work students. Diversity. Okay, we are all like really honing in on this word. It is the buzzword of the year, I feel like, is diversity. I feel like it waxes and wanes in popularity, and right now everybody's like diversity. So this is huge. This is huge, especially in higher ed right now. We are talking about ways that we can teach diversity better. But we social workers, we are really big into diversity, and we understand that the human relationship and just our humanness of society and things like that. We need that diversity. So this is the knowledge of multiple cultures, beliefs, and social identities. Now, when I first heard this as I was going into social work, I was like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to know all this? Like, that's insane. And we call it cultural competency. Now, that doesn't mean that you're just going to come out of this program and be like, I know everything about every culture, because that's not realistic, and that's not what we teach. But we do teach is how to research and how to understand different cultures. So that way, when you are researching how these different cultures interact, their religious viewpoints or spiritual viewpoints, their traditions and values and things like that, that you are able to really like synthesize them and really analyze them from a social work lens and to be able to use them in interventions with our clients. So that's what we're talking about there. So we do have different social work degrees. We have the BSW, which you are starting the track for the BSW program, which is the Bachelor's of Social Work. After that, we have the Master's in Social Work. So the Bachelor's in Social Work is, we have another slide about it. It's the generalist, meaning that we are pretty much teaching you how to be a jack of all trades, but an expert in none. So a generalist education, which almost all BSWs are a generalist approach, means that we are teaching you all the skills to become a good social worker. You pick a niche if you want a niche when you get out in the field or when you go into your master's. I'll get into that here in just a minute. But you have to have a Bachelor's of Social Work if you want to take the state licensure exam. And we'll talk about licenses and certifications here in a minute. The cool thing is once you have your Bachelor's in Social Work, if you decide to get your master's, which I highly recommend, and we'll talk about how the levels equate out in the field. But if you decide to go get your master's after you have a Bachelor's in Social Work, it's only one more year. One more year, okay, at full time. Or you can go part-time and take 2 years, okay? And then you have a Master's in Social Work. So in social work, a master's is what we consider the terminal degree, meaning that you don't need to get a higher degree than a master's to be at the top of your game in the field of social work. What you can do, I mean, it's pretty awesome because once you get your master's, you can sit for what we call supervision hours, and after 2 years, you can get your independent license. And once you get your independent license, you can have your own private practice. You can contract with other organizations. I mean, you're pretty much your own boss, which is really, really neat. So you do not need a doctorate to get at the top of your level here in the social work field. Then there's the DSW, which I have. I have a DSW, it's a doctorate in social work. And this is a practice degree, meaning that we're not so much focusing on like theories and theoretical foundations and things like that, but we actually are really big experts in practicing social work, even like really highlighting the macro level of social work. And so my whole degree focused on how to intervene in communities, how to do research, and those kinds of things. A PhD actually focuses more on the theoretical stuff, the theories and things like that. Most of your academic professors and stuff have a PhD. So those are the education wise. Licenses and certifications, sorry, I said that weird. So with licenses in Ohio, there's a couple of different credentials that you can get. However, the most common is once you become a licensed social worker, an LSW, okay? That is, you have a degree in social work and you took the state licensure exam and passed it, and then you can be a licensed social worker. In order to keep your license, you have to complete 30 continuing education credits or continuing education units every 2 years and submit that to your board. So every 2 years, you have to take a couple more classes, usually offered sometimes through your employer, or you can get them online, of continuing ed to keep your license. And you have to renew every 2 years. So then, as I've already mentioned, once you get your master's, if you decide to do that, you sit for 2 years with supervision. So every 40 hours that you work, you get 2 hours of supervision. You can do that. And you have to be supervised by a social worker that already has their independent license. But after you do that for 2 years and get the hours required, you can apply for your independent license as well. And it's really neat with an independent license because, like I said, you can contract with organizations. You are your own boss. No one has to sign off on your documentation or your work or anything. You get to handle all of that yourself. You can open up your own private practice. There's quite a few different things that you can do with that independent license. And then there's some other credentials and stuff that you can use as well. For example, you can have the credentials of a clinical social worker, and those have different requirements. And so those are things that you can find out by checking out the Ohio CSW-MFT board. Also with certifications, for example, I am a certified financial social worker. I took some classes when I was in my master's program and took a little test for this and became a certified financial social worker, which means that I can teach people about finances, how to build a budget, how to grow credit, those kinds of things, and teach financial literacy. There are definitely different other certificates out there, such as guidance counselors that social workers can be in schools, and quite a few other different ones. And those you can get through your master's program. You would just look to see which ones offer which certificates if you want to do that. Usually it's a few extra classes to do so. Or you might have certain programs that specialize in certain areas of social work. For one, my master's program specialized in community social work. I don't have a certificate or anything for it, but I did specialize in community social work when I was in my master's. So yeah, you just have to look those things up. You can also just take those programs outside of a university through an accredited program that will help you get that certificate. There are 3 different levels of practice. There's macro, meso, and micro. Macro is your large groups of people. So you're talking about community, state, national, and international levels. Meso is kind of like that mid-size, okay? So macro, if you want to talk about like cars, this might be a good way. Macro is your bus, okay? So you're going to treat everybody on that bus. All right, meso is like your van, your minivan. You've got a pretty good sized family in there, maybe some few family friends, right? Okay, so those are your groups, okay? And then micro is your individual. That is your little baby sports car or your little baby one-seater car, whatever those smart cars are. And but that's your one person, okay? That's your one person. It might be a couple, okay? That's okay. That's micro. It's pretty micro. But once you get into more of the families and groups and things like that, then you're looking more at that meso social work. And then, like I said, large groups, macro.